We're nearing the end of this module. Obviously, a lot of functionality of this application is still missing, but this module is about the routing. We'll add the functionality step by step throughout the course. One thing that is still missing though is the authentication page. When I tap logout here, I actually want to go to that authentication page, and I already want to have some dummy authentication flow here where I can't really authenticate, but where I can fake that I can authenticate, so that we can also control whether when the app starts we see that discover or offers or bookings part, or if we just see the authentication page and we need to log in first. Now for that we have that auth page here, of course. I'll set the title to authenticate, and I certainly don't want to add my menu button here because you can't go anywhere if you're not authenticated. Instead here I'll add a button, a normal button with a color of primary, and I'll say login. And later we'll add a real login with user input and so on. For now it's just a button. When we press this button, I want to execute on login, and I want to flip something that actually does set me to logged in. So simply a boolean that is switched to true for now, let's say. And for this I'll add a new service, an auth service. So with ionic generate a service, in my auth folder, I'll add a new auth service. So this will generate a new auth service file in there. Don't need the testing file. And that auth service file, for now, will simply have a user is authenticated property, which is false as a default, let's say. And I will add a login method here, which sets user is authenticated to true. And I'll add a logout method to that service, which when called will set user is authenticated back to false, so that we simply have that dummy authentication flow. That is all. Nothing too fancy, of course. Now on login in the auth page component has to be added, of course. This method has to be added here. And now here I want to trigger the login method in my service. For that I need to inject the auth service here. Auth service, make sure to add the import to the auth service file, and then on login I will simply call login on my auth service. One tiny thing I'll change is also I'll set user is authenticated to a private property and add a getter. Get user is authenticated and return this user is authenticated, simply to wrap this so that we can't set this directly from outside, but so that we have to use the login or logout method. Simply a pattern which isn't too bad to use to make sure you can't accidentally overwrite this to true or false from any other place in your app. You have to go through login or logout instead. So the auth page now has the on login method added that will actually trigger the login method in the auth service. That's part number one. But right now we never see the auth page, of course. And to see it, I want to add a guard that prevents access to both my places and my bookings in cases where I'm not authenticated. So that's the next thing we'll add.